Good afternoon. I'm Jyothika Shetty, Executive Director of Richland County Regional Planning Commission, which serves the Richland County area, including Mansfield. RCRPC is a single county planning commission and MPO, providing land use and transportation planning services to our members, our community partners, and the public to implement their regional and local goals. Thank you, everyone, for the conversations we have had today. We are fortunate that we live in a state that values planning and constantly is looking for ways to create a prosperous region. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing former City of Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley to the stage. Whaley served as the mayor of the City of Dayton from 2014 to 2022. As mayor, she led the City of Dayton through some of its biggest crises, bringing residents together to take on the city's toughest challenges. Before her time as mayor, she was elected to the Dayton City Commission in 2005, the youngest woman ever to be chosen for a commission seat, serving 2 terms as city commissioner. She also served as the deputy to the Montgomery County Auditor and presided over the United States Conference of Mayors from 2021 to 2022. Join me in welcoming Mayor Nan Whaley to the stage.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's great to see you all here. I heard before I came here in the back that Rap Hankins of Trotwood and Mayor Tom Johnson of Somerset received awards, and so I want to say congratulations, Tom. Where's Rap? Congratulations. Now that's proof that you're really including every single local official, from Tom Johnson to Rap Hankins. You are really covering a broad scope here, and I really appreciate that. But both are very committed to their communities and have worked with both of you all, and so it's well-deserved and really great to be here with you all today. As Jyoti mentioned, I'm the former mayor of Dayton and past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And look, I loved being mayor. It was a tough decision, frankly, for me to decide to run for governor. Mayor is a job where you can be visionary about where your community's going, and at the same time, you have to plow the snow and fill the potholes, or they kick your ass out of office. And I loved it. I loved talking to mayors. I loved texting with mayors. I think that is the job where, as local officials, you have to do both, and there's very few places like that in elected office. And so it was a tough decision for me to decide to run, a difficult one. And as I talked to other local leaders across the state to make the decision, I decided to run because what I've seen at the State House and in this administration is a group of folks that really don't work with local communities. And I said I could run for mayor again and be reelected, or I'd have to spend that time fighting to get less and less every single time, fighting against home rule status, or I could go and run for governor and try to have a real partner with local communities. And so that's what I decided to do. And it's been a great experience so far. I want to talk a little bit about my opponent. I think you've heard of him. He has been in office since I was 10 months old. I am 46 years old. And I don't say that to be funny, even though it is funny. I say it because I want you, if you were alive, to think about what Ohio was like in 1976. In 1976 Ohio, the average Ohioan wage earner made more than the average American. Today, they make less. In 1976, we exported cars. Today, we export our college graduates. In 1976, Ohio was the big time. People like me from a small town in Indiana wanting to move back. We led and were innovative. Today, we're on the top of bad lists and the bottom of good. We lead the country in things like infant mortality and corruption and when to die the soonest. That's what we've gotten with Mike DeWine's leadership in elected office and with Mike DeWine's Ohio. Now, I also think with this governor, we have witnessed someone who is too weak to stand up to extremists. And I've experienced this personally. As was mentioned, on August 4th, 2019, Dayton experienced a senseless mass shooting that left 9 people dead and 27 more injured in the course of 32 seconds. The next day, we held a vigil with thousands of Daytonians coming in the same place where we had lost our neighbors hours earlier. When Mike DeWine got up to the stage to speak, the people of Dayton began to shout, "Do something, do something," so loudly that the governor had to sit down and could not finish his comments. The next day, the governor called me. He told me he intended to do something around gun safety. If you check with folks in Dayton, I love to work bipartisanly. If you're willing to move in a direction I want to move, I am there. And I stood with him. I took him at his word. I stood with him as he unveiled the Strong Ohio bill, and then I watched him do absolutely nothing to move that bill forward. You see, the extremists in his party were more important. And then I watched him as he signed Stand Your Ground, a bill that makes our communities less safe, particularly African Americans in our cities. And then I watched him sign Permitless Concealed Carry, which increases officer-involved shootings by 14%, and law enforcement was against. And then I watched the governor sign, in the wake of Uvalde, a bill that arms teachers, bus drivers, and cafeteria workers with very little training, even though teachers, bus drivers, and cafeteria workers and law enforcement thought this was a bad idea. You see, 9 people dead in Dayton wasn't worth the political risk for Mike DeWine. The extremists in his party must be answered to always, and he is too weak to stand up to them, even when it makes making our communities more safe. Now, as tough as that was, and that was difficult to witness, what Ohio and American women have experienced from June 24th has been devastating. A right has been taken away from all women across America. But it is terrifyingly worse if you're an Ohio woman. 7 hours after Roe fell in this country, Mike DeWine and Dave Yost moved forward as quickly as possible the 6-week abortion ban in Ohio. And we've already seen the ramifications in this state. A 10-year-old girl raped in Columbus. When Mike DeWine was asked about this, his staff told reporters that she either didn't exist or she was lying. When Columbus police arrested her rapist, Mike DeWine had 2 words: no comment. A woman in Dayton, excited to carry a pregnancy to term, finds out on a regular visit that she has cancer. She has to terminate the pregnancy to save her own life. In Mike DeWine's Ohio, she is told she is not welcome here. She has to go across state lines to terminate that pregnancy so she can begin chemotherapy. Think about what that woman must be going through. Excited to be growing her family, and the next day having to fight to go through the process that Mike DeWine has created to put government mandates on women. And as bad as that is, it will get worse. Mike DeWine has told the anti-choice groups in the state that he wants to go, I'm quoting, as far as possible. What does that mean? A bill in the State House right now bans abortion at conception, bans birth control like IUD, and bans in vitro fertilization. This is what we're getting with Mike DeWine's Ohio. A government that is so extreme and out of touch, the majority of Ohioans are against, by big numbers. Recently, 82% of Ohioans said they wanted some sort of access to abortion. 90% said they believe in universal background checks for gun safety. Now, you all know 9 out of 10 Ohioans don't believe the Buckeyes are the best football team. This is nearly universal. That's what we're getting with the leadership right now. Now, I'm excited to be on a historic ticket with former mayor of Cleveland Heights and Cuyahoga County Councilwoman Cheryl Stevens. I've always figured what's best than one former female mayor, but 2 former female mayors. And we're excited to move forward on the issues that matter to everyday Ohioans. Making sure that people's pay goes up, their bills go down, and we finally have a government that works for them. So what does that mean? It means raising the wage to $15 an hour in the state and raising wages for all Ohioans. Right now, we have people working 2 jobs to make ends meet and still have to go to the food bank to provide for their children. It's un-American, it's un-Ohioan, it has to stop. It means investing in renewable technology, like green energy. We built the last manufacturing revolution in this state. There is no reason why we should not be a part of the future. And that means making solar panels and wind turbines with good union-paying jobs here in Ohio. Michigan and Pennsylvania are eating our lunch on this work. We also got to get bills down. That's why I recommended with the $2.6 billion that Mike DeWine give an inflation rebate to all working families, about 89% of Ohioans, to put $350 in their pocket so they could deal with the cost of gas and groceries. This is not a progressive idea. States like Florida and Indiana have done this. Also, we've got to stop price gouging. Ohio is one of the few states in the country where it's still legal for corporations to gouge consumers with no recourse. The governor could sign an executive order right now, and that would help us with prescription drug costs and also capping insulin rates at $30 a month, something the state of Kentucky has even done. Now, these are all common sense ideas. They're not fancy, they're direct, they need to happen. So why can't we have them in Ohio? Because we don't have a government that works for us. As I mentioned, the FBI has called the Ohio State House the most corrupt state house in the country. That takes some work. We see over and over again this legislature and this governor make their decisions on who lines their political pockets instead of what's best for working families in the state. That's why the first thing I did when I announced was to make sure we had a complete and total overhaul of our ethics pledge. You can check it out at nanwhaley.com/ethics, which includes getting money that's not disclosed out of our state politics. Now, I think we can do these things, including passing background checks, universal background checks, because that's where the majority of Ohioans are. And the day after I'm elected, we'll make sure that we put Roe versus Wade on the ballot to put in the Ohio Constitution, so no matter who comes next, Ohio women are protected. I think these are common sense ideas that will make a great difference for our state. Now, I want to talk a bit about the future of our state as well. I know you all wouldn't be here if you didn't care about our state as deeply as I do. We might not agree on everything, but I know we agree on that. We all want a state we can be proud of. A state where our kids and grandkids want to stay and build their futures. A state where companies and people from across the country want to move to. This is personal for me. I grew up in a small town in Indiana. Back then, Ohio seemed like the big time. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and when I told my parents I wanted to go to the University of Dayton, they made me agree to volunteer on President Clinton's re-election campaign because Ohio picked presidents. I want kids all across the country to see Ohio the same way I did and come here for the opportunity we can offer them. If you share that vision with me, then here is the truth. This is one of the most important elections of our lifetimes, because I am not sure people realize just how close we are to turning into a state that young people and companies actively avoid. And I'm not exaggerating here. If you are a young woman and know that if you face complications during your pregnancy, you could die on the operating table because all abortion is outlawed, are you going to want to move here? Are you going to want to stay here if you don't have that choice? If you're a young person who grew up with active shooter drills and see the news every week of senseless mass shootings, are you going to want to stay in a state where our governor has signed a law to allow anyone to carry a concealed weapon without a permit or background check? Why would you stay here if you can't feel safe going about your daily life? If you care about democracy, why would you want to stay in a state where our elected leaders openly flaunt the rule of law and ignore both Ohio voters and the state Supreme Court by drawing unconstitutional legislative and congressional districts? And think about what this will mean for companies that want to move or expand here. Why would you come to Ohio if you can't attract the top talent? Or when you know the government will give away corrupt bailouts like House Bill 6 that you have to foot the bill for? Just 3 weeks ago, we saw one of Indiana's largest companies say they'll have to rethink their presence there because of the state's abortion ban. Folks, it's just a matter of time until we see that here in Ohio, too. Folks on the coast love to look down on places like Ohio. They expect the awful scenario I just laid out. And they're more than happy to take our young people and companies that leave. But it does not have to be that way. We have a choice, and we can choose something better. I'm in this race because I'm ready to prove the naysayers wrong about our state. I'm ready to show Mike DeWine and his corrupt and extremist buddies that Ohio isn't going to accept their harmful policies. I'm ready to prove to the elites on the coast wrong and show them that Ohio isn't some backwards, declining state. This state built the middle class of the 20th century, and we are ready to do it again. And what that takes isn't us agreeing on everything. What it takes is us refusing the extremism and politics of division that Mike DeWine and others in his party are pushing. What it takes is us saying we won't strip women of their rights. We won't make our state less safe, and we will not settle for decline. We can build an Ohio where every family can thrive, no matter where you live. But that choice really starts this November. And frankly, it's time for all of us to step up. Thank you. I sit here, right?
I'm there.
Oh, do you want to shake your hand?
Thank you, Mayor. It was great to see you again.
Great to see you, Chris. Chris is a chemistry major like I was. I learned that out back, so I'm very excited.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's very rare that I meet anyone else in this field who started in chemistry and then transitioned into public service and government service.
I know, it's rare for me too, so I'm very excited. I'm going to scoot this way so I can see you better.
So in the back room, we were just talking about how much we remembered of chemistry, and but it
Not
was
much. I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not saying that about you, but
well, none of my former chemistry professors are here, so I can really say whatever I want.
Okay.
I remember all of it. I could go pass an organic chemistry final tomorrow.
Oh, there you go.
And if you believe that, I got a bridge
you
to
can
sell
sell you, yeah.
Right, right across the Ohio River. which is what they call in the field a segue. My name is Chris Childs. I'm the Executive Director of Kiowa Interstate Planning Commission. So we are a tri-state transportation planning agency. So our region encompasses Eastern Kentucky, Southwestern West Virginia, and Lawrence County in Southern Ohio. So we are located along and divided by the Ohio River. But as you can imagine, Mayor, that means I've got board members from 3 states, and we work with 3 different state DOTs and federal highway administrations. So regionalism is a buzzword that we talk about in our office constantly. Planning, communication as well is critical. So with that being said, if you could talk a little bit about the role of regional councils, if you were, as governor, how they fit into your strategy for infrastructure, jobs, and more. As you know, the Ohio Association of Regional Councils here, so we work throughout Ohio assisting local communities, many of whom don't have the capacity to do so themselves. So it's not just transportation, it's a range of services, transportation, other types of infrastructure, community economic development. So as governor, how would you see the regional council's role?
Well, I think they have a really important role, and I actually think they could be broadened in some ways. I served a few years on Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. I don't know if they're in the room, but okay, good. I'm glad to see you guys. Hi. The work that I've seen done, where they've been empowered to by state law, has made a big difference on like where we prioritize infrastructure for sure in the entire region, because there's a limited amount of dollars, and so what the MPOs say is really, really key in that. I think that we can do more, for example, around affordable housing with MPOs. We clearly have an affordable housing issue across the state. I don't care if you're in a small community or a big city. I hear about it across the state everywhere. And we need to make sure that we not place affordable housing just in one city or one place. We need to have it in all communities, rural, suburban, and urban. And I think the MVRP, like the MPOs, could play a larger role in that if empowered to do that. So that way we could have more common sense approach to affordable housing. I also think, there is big opportunities because just like you are in 3 states, down in Cincinnati, there's a 3-state MPO as well. And so we also have to recognize that this is a region that even goes further than Ohio. And the MPOs, I think, are uniquely positioned that way because of the work that they do, because a lot of our cities are on or near state lines. And so that gives us opportunities as well to think about how we really connect for jobs, not just getting people from West Virginia to come to Ohio, but the same idea back. And then I think the last point I'll make about how important MPOs are, I think their leadership, particularly I'll shout out Morpsey here, Morpsey's work on really spearheading what I like to call affectionately the 3C and D rail, which I hope we can make happen, and if governor would be a priority for me, to really connect ourselves from region to region, not just in the regions itself. And so I think that's the other key part that the MPOs can play a heavy role in with the governor's office.
Well, and I appreciate the comparison to Kiowa and OKI.
You're welcome.
So it's Ironton in Lawrence County has been called Cincinnati of Southern Ohio many times,
yes.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we do. Was that Mark laughing that loud? So we do appreciate that, and it is certainly a unique situation. So speaking of tough graders like my chemistry professors in undergrad, the American Society of Civil Engineers recently upgraded Ohio's infrastructure grade from a D+ to a C-, which was probably right around where I was at in organic.
Oh, I'm sure you did better.
So
you were a major. You had to get through the organic. Sorry.
No, that's quite. I was trying to think of a good segue there as well.
I'm sorry. I completely took you off the rails.
No. Sorry, I'm being told we need to get back to infrastructure, not my college undergraduate grades. So going from a D+ to a C- certainly is an improvement. And again, those are some tough graders, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. So, as you know, Ohio just passed critical motor fuel tax in the last General Assembly, and that's partially filled some of the budget holes. And then, of course, at the federal level, we've got the bipartisan infrastructure law now. And so that's really presenting a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Ohioans. So what is your plan to leverage some of these resources and just really help our communities here in the state prosper?
Yeah, so as president of the Conference of Mayors, I was honored to really lead the effort on the local level to move forward for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We got 450 mayors from across the country to sign it. You know, local leaders of the last era of bipartisanship, right? And so the mayor of Oklahoma City, who is a Republican, and I worked together to really galvanize mayors from across the country to push it, you know, in the many alliterations we've had during the infrastructure bill. Mayors like to joke that we were in Infrastructure Week for 8 years to try to get that bill through. And I'm really proud of that work that we did, and making sure that Ohio gets its fair share is really, really important in that work. I think there's big opportunities there. I'll say again, you know, I see this administration over and over again leave federal dollars on the table. We're seeing that likely with passenger rail. We're going to see that in other issues like veterans' home on veteran services. They're doing that right now. If they don't politically agree on it, even if it would help a community, the money is not allowed to come in the state. And that's a real problem. We need to put people and their communities first, not the politics first, that we see so often at the State House and in this administration. So I think that's a really important part in the partnership on the federal infrastructure bill work. And you're right, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. You know, as a mayor, I'm a fix-it-first kind of person, right? Like, I think we need to fix our infrastructure that is broken first instead of constantly building new that will have to be dealt with local leaders 3 to 4 decades away. And so that's a big, important piece as a mayor of a legacy city I feel very strongly about. I think that is key. And then look, I think there are real needs for some new infrastructure, for example, like getting Toledo to be able to get to Columbus like every other larger city in the state can do. So there's keys where we need to make sure that connection happens. If we really want Intel to be successful for all of the state, well, it's not going to help Toledo at all if they don't have even a road that really gets to that location. So we have to be cognizant of how roads and jobs connect across the region and how we move people in different ways in the future. That's the sort of investment I'm really committed to. And look, I think, you know, the investment into making sure our bridges don't fall apart. I've met with the county engineers. They have a lot to say about it. We need to make sure that that investment moves forward too. And I do think the state's role in making sure we have that funding, but tying it and making sure that we get our fair share plus from the federal government is a must.
I think something that a lot of folks don't realize unless you're in government service or the infrastructure field is that these projects are expensive. And
mayors know. So. Yeah. I mean, we had to wait till like 2021 to get Salem Avenue done because you had to dig it all up, you know, a lot of times, and it's very, very expensive. And the trajectory for this money, you know, is usually like 2 elected officials out, right? So a lot of times, you know, we did, like as mayor of Dayton, we did the funding for, you know, right when I was mayor, and 8 years later, we're seeing it for sure, because it is so expensive when you cobble together all the different fundings to make it happen in a community.
Well, and
I'm a terrible person to interview, Chris.
You made a perfect segue into the next question, actually. No, you did my job for me, and I appreciate that. So one of the ways that these projects are paid for is through the motor fuel tax, and you know, inflation right now is a real concern for a lot of Ohioans. And so, you know, it's been discussed about the possibility of repealing or pausing the motor fuel tax. You know, it may provide some relief to struggling Ohioans, but at the same time, it may really decrease the state's transportation budget. So I'd like to curious what your views are on that.
Yeah, I've come out in favor of doing a 6-month pause on the 38.5 cents a gallon and backfilling it with the rainy day fund. Like, I recognize we cannot leave the hole that is so needed for our infrastructure cuts and how tough this has been, right? You know, I know folks like me fought to make sure that this happened, but we also need to be cognizant of the top 10 commute cities in the country. 4 are in Ohio: Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton. And so the cost that we've seen for rising gas costs has like really affected our community and our workers. And so doing that pause and then backfilling it for 6 months with rainy day, I think would help be able to get the crisis of gas costs under control. And we're already seeing that happen. But we have to pay attention to what working families need. And as governor, I'll be unapologetic of putting working families first in these decisions, first and always.
So as technology continues to increase, in both with production of cars and other types of our lives, and you know the gas tax is not going to be what it is 10 years from now, maybe, as what it was.
Right.
You know, 10
and we
years
hope so
ago.
for our climate and everything, right?
And so certainly some other types of revenues are going to have to be implemented. And ODOT has convened a working group to explore some other revenue creation options. OARC's own Grace Galucci from Nowaka in the Cleveland area is a representative on that group to represent some of the regional organizations. And so just curious what other types of new or alternative revenue creation mechanisms that your administration would consider.
I'm pretty open on this. Like, I don't have a position of this is the one I would do. I would really want to work with the MPOs around that, as well as other folks that are advocates for renewable energy and the work on renewable energy on that. We cannot let it just go. We can do some incentivizing for folks to decide to go electric or use other modes of transportation for a bit, but overall, we're going to have to get a funding source for roads and bridges, right? They're still going to be on them, whether they're taking gas cars or other kind of cars. So I'm open to that conversation. I do think as we see technology change in this as well, and how goods and services are going to be moved across our state and country and the world with automated driving, for example, I think there's going to be a lot of ways that we can figure out this, and I'm open to being as creative as possible and making sure that fits. Well, with the caveat that we think about how it affects working families first. Like, I think that's the key part that this administration and this state house continues to miss. They first want to tax the hell out of working families and forget about the corporations and millionaires. And we have got to flip that if we're really serious about making people's quality of life strong in Ohio.
So as a spoiler alert, that working group right now has around 30 ideas that they put together.
Yeah. And you guys had a lot.
And we've been promised that will be shortened before it's presented beyond the working group.
So you're going to prioritize them?
Well, fortunately, I'm not smart enough to be on that group to
really
be
you're
able
a chemistry
to
major. You're the smartest person here, right?
Right. From your lips to God's ears.
Well, I look forward to that and working with you on that.
So speaking of technology, everybody in the room has a cell phone, and nobody in this room, I'm sure, has ever texted while driving. However,
like no one's used marijuana either.
However, no one, despite that, others outside of this room have potentially, texted while driving, and that type of technology certainly has its advantages, but it is a double-edged sword. Distracted driving is certainly one of those unintended consequences. So, yeah, it can increase efficiency. It can provide better services. It can at times really increase public safety. But distracted driving, it's a real concern, and it's only going to continue to grow. And so I'm just curious, when can we? What are your thoughts on legislation such as HB 283 and making distracted driving a primary offense, and what can we do as transportation and regional councils to assist with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, distracted driving is a concern. I don't think it's going to be as long-term, like 30 years from now kind of concern and long-term planning, but it is a concern right now, because I do think we're getting ready to see a huge disruption in the way that our cars work, and we're seeing some of that already, but I think it will happen very quickly. And so we need to make sure that people, just as they're not driving while intoxicated, which, studies have shown that actually distracted driving is even worse when you're moving around, and texting and driving is worse than even driving while intoxicated. So that has to be a priority. And yeah, I'm in favor of, working to make sure that passes. I'm not holding my breath with anything of this illegitimate state legislature doing that has any kind of common sense, but we'll continue to fight and work for it.
Well, don't hold back on my account.
Yeah, not a problem.
I've got two
that
daughters.
That was light for me, really.
I've got two daughters at home, so I'm used to folks being honest and forthright with me.
I think we need more of that in our politics, really. So thank you, Chris. And they sound so smart. Maybe they are smarter than you.
They definitely are. Luckily, they inherited their mother's brains, good looks, and not so lucky her attitude. That's for a different conversation. I'm only kidding.
You're really going over the line.
I'm only kidding. She's not here today. I can say that. So
we should take us on the road. We'd have a big time.
I'll clear my schedule.
All right, good. Good. I'm counting on it.
So we've been talking a lot about transportation and infrastructure, obviously, and I don't think that's a surprise
right.
for given the room and certainly a lot of the regional council's role in that. But there are other types of infrastructure. One of which is certainly is water and water quality. So I'd like to, if we could transition just a little bit and talk about some of that toxic algae blooms that are really devastating a lot of our lakes and our waterways. So you've got not just Lake Erie, you've got Maumee River, you've got Grand Lake St. Mary's and others. And experts, probably some chemists involved in that, have found that 87% of the algae feeding nutrients come from non-point sources, primarily agriculture. And the Ohio EPA and other experts really agree that some of the voluntary efforts by the agriculture community are not doing enough to move the needle on this. And so I'm just wondering if you're willing to pursue stronger regulation. That could be part of or separate from the ongoing H2O effort. But would you increase some regulation or rely on the continuing voluntary compliance?
Yeah. So
take that however you'd like.
Yeah, I'm happy to say. First, I think the H2O is a good carrot, but we're not going to get much here, as they point out, the experts point out, without some sticks or regulations. And as someone that is downstream from the lake, coming all the way down the watershed into Dayton, we've been called on, at times to clean the phosphorus out through our sewer systems. So that puts the reliance back on the taxpayer, right? No matter how this ends, it's going to end if we don't hold those accountable that are polluting the water. It ends up on the taxpayers in some way, fairly or unfairly. And right now, the way that is happening is usually through urban communities having to do the cleaning of the phosphorus to move on downstream. So I have a lot of opinions on this, being, the former mayor of Dayton, which, provided water for 400,000 people in the region. I think, the mayor of Toledo is very passionate about this and has been very strong about this issue, that we need to make sure that we get regulations in place so we stop this phosphorus runoff. And I think we can do it in a way because, frankly, it is not small farmers that are doing this. These are multinational corporations, mega farmers, that many aren't even in Ohio, that we're allowing to destroy our water systems, which we all say water is our biggest and best asset in this state. And I think it is. We need to act as such. And that means, again, incentives are good, but you also have to make sure you have real regulations. And right now, that's just not something this administration's interested in. They are not interested in doing anything to folks that are lining their political pockets or is like a multi-million-dollar organization not in this state. And that's what we're seeing right now with the lack of work. And we see it particularly, this is a big issue in the western part of the state, over and over again when we have to deal with sewer and overall when you want to camp at Grand Lake St. Mary's. It's a big issue for Salina and those other areas as well.
One common comment it seems I get from any mayor that you'll talk to across the country is once you're in office, you know more about water and sewer than you ever wanted to know.
Yes, we're so exciting at parties. We'd like to talk about combined sewer overflow and what kind of water infrastructure you have. I guess like the MPO guys like that too, so we really make fun right there. So, any party we're invited to.
If you want to talk about traffic modeling, in depth, just come to one of our parties.
Exactly.
I understand completely. So, not sure, another type of infrastructure that I'd like to kind of pivot to, not sure if you've heard of this new thing called the internet and broadband.
Tell me more.
But so apparently it's really becoming just as important as far as utilities go as water, as sewer, as electric, gas, cable television.
Cable's out, internet's in, that's what it seems, right?
That's true, that is very true, yeah. I stream everything now, so. But one of the reasons I'm able to stream everything is because I am very fortunate to have quality, affordable, reliable internet at my house. And unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone. Almost a third of the rural residents in the state lack home access broadband. 2% of the urbanites can say the same. That's according to FCC. That's not Chris Child's numbers. And one of my neighbors is a social worker, and I was talking with him the other day, and he was talking about especially the early days of COVID, where some of the kids that he was going to see in some of the more rural areas, they were their grandparents had custody because their parents had some sort of a substance abuse, and especially during those early days when everything was online for schooling. Because their grandparents were elderly, they didn't understand the technology, and they didn't have internet at their home, and they weren't able or willing to drive them to somewhere where they could get internet. And so a lot of these kids were having truancy issues. They were good kids, but just dealt a bad hand in life and had truancy issues. And so, I'm just through HB2 grant program and some others that are we're starting to move in a positive direction. But there's more money needed, so I'm just curious what your priorities are as far as how to address the digital divide.
Yeah, so you're right. We saw this really exacerbated during the pandemic, really mostly in urban and rural areas where the affordability is a big issue and where it's really impossible in some places to get it to be affordable because of how less dense it is. When during this election, I worked with Mayor Feeney of Chillicothe, Mayor Patterson of Athens, Mayor Lawrence of Belpre, Mayor Cramblett of Ironton to put together our Southern Ohio plan, and it calls for universal broadband by 2028. And the reason why this is important is the state has to get engaged in this. It has to happen, and we have to leverage nonprofits and communities to be able to have municipal broadband opportunities to keep it affordable, right? If we just let corporations do this, in Southern Ohio, if we let corporations decide when they were going to have lights, we'd still be waiting. It has to be the government engaged in this, and we have to really empower nonprofits and municipalities to be able to do that. And we have to make sure it's affordable, because if you offer it and it's so expensive you can't even get it, what's the difference of having it at all? And so that, I think, is really key. I'm proud of that plan. I'm proud of that work. We know it is key to the success of our kids. Again, another reason why would our kids want to stay if they can't even connect to other places. And it will also, particularly in small communities in Southern Ohio, give them a real edge because of the affordability issue, how beautiful it is there. And if you have really good broadband, there are people that would be interested even in remote work in places like Southern Ohio for sure. So there's big opportunity there that we're really missing out. And again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record here. It's because we have an illegitimate state house that's bought and sold by the utilities, and not only the utilities, but the communication companies that aren't interested in the government being engaged in that and want to figure out how they can have the wealthy people get it and then do nothing for those that need to have it affordable. And we've got to stop that if we're really serious about growing the state.
Well, I'm happy to hear you talk about the affordability issue, and that's because I often sound like a broken record with talking with communities where they hear about this grant or that grant. And my first question, I have to be the wet blanket in the room, and I always say, okay, well, where's the match going to come from?
Right.
Do you have that local match?
Right.
It may say 20% minimum, but really you need a 50% match.
Right, because the more the match, then you get more points on the score, right?
As you know from your time as well.
Well, I was down in Southern Ohio this week, as you know, because we talked about it. I was with a couple of mayors in Southern Ohio, and match, they can't have a match at all. If you're a small community, a match would be $2,000, right? That's a big hit for some of these really, really small communities. And so we really need to rethink how we're doing some of that scoring if we're going to be serious about really helping local communities. And there's a way that we can do that to make that a priority. Again, it's just not been an interest in this state house. What I've seen from this governor is if you're not the Columbus Metro, no offense to Morpsey, you all have to fight for scraps, and we need to have more investment all across the state.
So transitioning kind of to our last couple questions and last topic around Jobs Ohio. And so the creation of Jobs Ohio ended the successful Clean Ohio program for brownfield.
I know, I loved that program, being the mayor of Dayton. It was great. Just want to say, great program.
What, to take off?
Well, I just think brownfield redevelopment is key for legacy cities. Most of our cities are legacy cities. They built the last manufacturing revolution. They've used a lot of their special spaces to provide wealth for the state, and we need to make sure that we have real brownfield remediation. And it cannot be a loan. It has to be a grant, as many people know, to get the market going and really have strong economic development in legacy cities. That has to happen, and we need to make sure those sites get clean. We've had great examples of that happening in Dayton, and it was mostly because of the Clean Ohio funding that was stopped that was so key for that.
So, talk a little bit more then, so maybe as your viewpoint as mayor and then transitioning as governor, how you would really direct the state's efforts, where that focus would go on as far as redevelopment of potential sites.
Well, as the former mayor of a legacy city and talking to legacy cities, we know we have to have that kind of investment. And again, this is back to my point. In this state, we've had one metro that has truly grown, and it's the Columbus Metro. And we've seen that most of the growth from the Columbus Metro has come at the expense, and I'm talking about population here, at the expense of all the other metros. The answer to Ohio cannot be, if you want to stay in Ohio as a young person, you need to move to Columbus. That is not going to be sustainable. It is not going to be a way that's real for growth. And the growth from all the census data shows that it's mostly, I used to live in Marion. I used to live in Youngstown. I used to live in insert older industrial city. So the investment, and this is a huge opportunity for Ohio. We have amazing, amazing communities that are so unique and different from size to personality, and we need to make sure that there's real investment in there. And that means really investing in brownfields. It means making sure that we have real partnerships for small business development. Now, I know they're not fancy, and the governor doesn't get as many ribbon cuttings that are big and make national or state news, but it's really key. No matter if you're in Portsmouth or Dayton or even Columbus, small business is the backbone of what's going to grow our communities. The state needs to really draw that. And then finally, there are tons of best practices from Greater Ohio and other groups about how we can really revitalize our legacy cities. It is the strategy to make sure that we are key to growth. We have to be inclusive and welcoming, and we also need to make sure that we're investing in places that are not just Columbus. Obviously, I'm very passionate as the mayor of Dayton, former mayor of Dayton. This is a key part, and it gives us a huge opportunity in this state because those cities are affordable, they're awesome, they have great opportunities. And the small towns, I think there are people that really want to live there too if they can find a good paying job, they can get broadband, and they can have access to their families. We have to do that if we're going to be serious about growth in the state. The answer of just investing in one metro is a failed answer. You can see with what we're getting over on our state outcomes.
So as we end our time here, and I could go on and on and on.
I know, we should definitely go get a beer sometime. This is great.
Well, you have your people call.
Okay.
We'll call them. I don't have people, so you have your people call me, and we'll set something up. But so, many of the regional councils that are members of OARC are also economic development districts, and the work with Jobs Ohio over the last as they celebrate their 10-year anniversary. So, just talk a little bit. I mean, you've already kind of touched on it a little bit about how successful you think the approach of Jobs Ohio has been, and what changes your potential administration would propose to help it meet, your new economic development needs.
I can't really tell you how.
Take that any direction.
I can't really tell you how successful Jobs Ohio has been because it's not transparent. And so, I have a big issue again in when the FBI calls the Ohio State House the most corrupt state house in the country, the best disinfectant is the sunshine. And we have got to have more transparency in this stuff. I know Kasich did this because he wanted it not to be transparent, so we can't really measure it. And I think that's a real problem for us. So yeah, if they say they're doing a good job, everybody says, okay, but what is the measurement? What is really happening? It's the same with the Intel issue, right? I'm happy Intel's coming. The state of Ohio put $2 billion in Intel. What are we getting out for it? And when you're a local community and you do economic development, you have to tell the public and have clawbacks and be very clear with these companies what you're getting and back and forth on it. And that is lost in this administration and at the State House. So I can't tell you the answer to that. Nobody really can. The second piece I want to be clear on is the point of economic development is to create good paying jobs that will provide for a family. We've got to stop the investment in low wage jobs and a race to the bottom because that just puts more pressure, frankly, on our systems, on our particularly county systems, that when you have folks working, that somebody's gotten an incentive, they're doing a low wage job to come in, and then they're still on our systems. That is not a win for the family. It's not a win for the community. What's the point? We need to keep in mind why we're trying to grow jobs, that they need to be able to provide for a family. And that should be the priority first, as I mentioned at the beginning. Working families, what is needed for working families should be what drives the state. And sadly, that is not the case.
Mayor, thank you for your
Thank you.
time. I
Thanks a
really
lot.
enjoyed this.
I have too. It's been fun. I should have more chemists interview me for sure. Thank you all.
Probably why I didn't last very long, but thank you.